keyboard hobby has come a long way for us to get to where we are now. It wasn't always Keychron and QWERTY keys holding down the fort, but I guess you already knew that, huh? In the early 2010s, a time when Cherry still held the MX switch patent, a number of individuals over in South Korea had already started exploring custom keyboards, CNC'd aluminium chassis and custom keycaps, while the rest of us were still typing away on our Razor keyboards. So today, I'd like to take you all back to school, help you get that doctorate degree by looking at how this god-forbidden hobby really started and how the Eastern keyboard scene led us to where we are today, doing so with boards that now fetch 5-figure sums on the aftermarket. Now if you're new here, I'm Charo, I'm a man of keyboards and poor financial decisions, and we tend to talk about all things keyboard hobby on this channel, so if that's your kind of thing, make sure to stick around and hit subscribe down below if you want to see more of this kind of content. But enough of that, back to keyboards, and specifically the South Korean community known as OTD. Like our well-known RMK and Geek Hack, OTD or On The Desk started as a non-profit community for all things keyboards, but like with many other hobbies, doing so way ahead of us Westerners. The site first posts date back to 2008, and while Geek Hack was founded a year earlier, Geek Hack's primary talking points at the time were on vintage boards such as old Cherries and the IBM Beam Springs that enthusiasts were using against the grain of the membrane keyboards that had struck the masses. OTD on the other hand had members designing and producing boards milled out of aluminium, as most of today's are, and posting these up on the forums or selling these in very limited group buy quantities. OTD wasn't the only message board making waves at the time, with KBD Mania being around for 5 years at this point, the OG South Korean message board for all things keyboards. So what have these message boards got to do with the hobby we know and love today? Well, it's a little hard to tell you the whole story because I don't speak Korean, but what I can do is talk about some of the first boards that came to be, and why they are the reason that we have a lot of the boards in the hobby that we do today. Now the software ecosystem itself, how we know it today, didn't really exist, with the early boards being PS2 based or just having far more restrictive controllers, but board design itself was well and truly thriving. And that leads me to the original custom keyboard, the DK Saver. The group buy for this board ran all the way back in 2006, and it was a TKL that really set the benchmark for what the TKL footprint should be on the desk, sporting this reduced break that is seen on TKLs of today's era, but was very different to the traditional boards in this form factor. Like the vintage boards of the time, the board came in wing keyless, and it's said that one of the mods over on KBD Mania took the DK Saver to the Philco headquarters in Japan, inspiring the company to make the TKL a far more accessible layout to the masses. But back to OTD, and specifically the customs that paved the way for the Western keyboards that followed. The first true custom that followed the DK Saver was the OTD 356L, meaning optimized for linear switches. This was closely followed by the OTD 356N, meaning optimized for non-click or tactile switches. Young Sam, the designer, was said to have spent a lot of time and money prototyping the boards to make sure that the final product met up to his high standards in terms of what the boards were designed to do. He used the same PCB material as that of OG Cherry boards, which was CEM3, instead of the usual FR4 that we've come to know, in order to replicate the feeling of OG Cherry boards into the 356N. He also opted for a thinner PCB, so a 1.2 sizing as opposed to the 1.5 thickness that was seen in Cherry's PCBs of the time, in order to help the PCB flex more and to allow for a better typing feel. Young Sam had also thought out the case design so there was deliberately space left at the bottom of the case. He did this to increase pleasant pinging sounds made by tactile switches. Bet you guys didn't think pleasant and pinging would go together, eh? The 356N is also the first keyboard that used a rubber band in between the PCB and plate to produce a bouncy typing feel while helping to reduce unpleasant sounds. It's kind of crazy to think this was making its way into the hobby 15 years ago, right? From here on out, boards started to get a little more recognizable to what we have in the hobby today. The first of these boards was the 356CL, which was the first board to sport an angled case and a brass insert for a weight. Not to mention the engraving above the arrow cluster, which is the mainstay for the majority of group buy TKLs that run now in some form or another. In 2010, the OTD 356 Mini was introduced, which carried a lot of the same features as its older brother, but interestingly featured a brass weight on the outside of the board this time, and featured slightly tighter tolerances for the switches within the plate, being a full 8 shorter than recommended Cherry specs. This small footprint board, along with the addition of an O-ring gasket, and not to mention the really interesting wing design on the plate, cement the 356 Mini in the hobby as one of the grails, not to mention all the design aspects of the board that are still so heavily present in today's mechanical keyboards. Similarly, we have the OTD Koala, designed by OTD member Corellas. This has held a lot of influence even in today's era of the hobby. The koala side profile being very subtle yet effective was a first for the time, with boards implementing this throughout the years even up until recently. And this brings me on to the 360C, one of, if not the most influential board in terms of custom keyboard design. The 360C featured a lot of the design aspects of earlier models, wing key blockers and an engraving above the arrow cluster, red aluminium plate and top mount, but refined these into a TKL that is sickeningly close to a lot of the newer TKLs that are hitting Keycaps today. Three parts of this board that stick out to me are the relief cuts in the plate that are definitely a re-emerging trend in today's top mount keyboards, along with the through weight on the bottom housing. I don't think I have to explain that one. But most importantly, the coarser side profile that has been used a number of times over the years, with variations made to it resulting in a lot of the grail keyboards that we have in the space. Interestingly, young Sam, who designed the majority of the OTD lineup, had another love for classic cars, with all the model numbers of the board relating to classic cars themselves. The Corsa in 360C comes from the Rosso Corsa paint used on the Ferrari 360. Now, there are a number of other boards that appeared through OTD that I haven't mentioned, and they were all influential in their own right. But the OTD lineup weren't the only influential boards of the time. Like many of today's customs, the OTD lineup came few and far apart, with very limited runs, in some cases producing only 30 units. This is where the KMAC 1 came in, a board from one of the guys over at KBD Mania, who, out of spite for the group buy model, created the KMAC 1 in a hope that it could allow custom keyboards to be far more accessible to anyone who wanted one. The board didn't have the angled case like the OTD lineup of the same time period, but it did offer wing key and wing keyless versions, paying homage to the vintage boards that came before it. The board also offered a mini USB port, something that was very rare for the time. The bottom mounted plate did feature this really nice logo cutout, and this is something that's seen in newer boards, and something I really like when paired with a polycarbonate top case. The KMAC Mini was a board that came a few years after, sporting an angled wedge design reminiscent of the 2019 and 2020 customs. This obviously took heavy inspiration from some of the very influential IBM keyboards. The better known as XT panel is something that is very prevalent on a lot of customs, whether this is a full 10 key macro panel or a 5 key, and it's something that influenced one of my favourite boards by Ion Keyboards, the Zenith. The KMAC Mini at the time could be made to order, but finding one nowadays is almost impossible, much like any of the early OTD keyboards. And if you're lucky enough to find one, well, you better be ready to take out a second mortgage, because none of these things are cheap. Shortly after, a number of other high-end custom keyboards started appearing from overseas. Boards like the Duck Orion, sporting that signature Underglow, was first run in 2014, with version 2.5 going live only back in 2020. Other boards emerging out of South Korea forums during this time were the LZ or Life Zone boards. The first in the line was the LZS, which emerged during the early 2010s. LZ actually made a board in collaboration with Keycaps, which first ran in 2013 and featured this bar to create the angle for the board. This ran for R2 in 2018 and was definitely an important step for the hobby. When the first customs started appearing over in South Korea, the individuals who could obtain these were few and far between. The original group buy really gave a larger number of people in the West the opportunity to purchase a Korean custom they'd been dreaming of. Needless to say, this still wasn't too many people. The hobby hadn't even really been born over here at this point. Now, keyboards themselves weren't the only thing that OTD and the like contributed to the hobby very early on. Keycaps was another big one. One of my favourite sets at the moment is GMK Red Alert, which first ran as OTD Red Alert and the DCS profile with the beautiful OG red numbers to really set the set apart. Pardon the pun. OTD Sawara was a set that was inspired by a Keycap set originally on an old Weiss keyboard, with the name supposedly being short for "Sorry It's a Weiss Replica," while others claim that the set is supposedly read as Sky Blue Weiss Replica. Either way, this is a set that Keycaps copied along with many of OTD's group buys at the time. From reading the forums, there seemed to be a little bit of hostility. The set has now been rerun very recently, once again in the DCS profile, with the group buy ending earlier this year. These first true customs are what led us to some other designers that really influenced the modern era of keyboard design. I don't really need to go into detail on the influence of TGR and the Jane, but even if you're unfamiliar with the board, the presence of Toblerone weights in keyboard design now highlights the importance of the board for the keyboard community. Linworks releasing boards like the Dolphin really pushed the boundaries of what bezels of a metal rectangle could be, and without the EM7 or the Alice that followed, we wouldn't have this beloved stylized ergonomic layout that is so prevalent now, with companies like Akko even releasing their own variations. The South Korean influence on the hobby really did lead us to where we are today, but that doesn't mean there aren't still figures in the community who are inspiring a new generation of designers and enthusiasts. Gion, who operates out of South Korea, has a cult-like following, and his design language and production quality are both meticulous, which is to be expected from a CNC machining expert first and foremost. He also provides files that I for one find extremely interesting to understand more about the design of the product itself. From a content creation side, as many people as Teha put onto keyboards, Wildcat definitely inspired a lot of people to dive into this hobby, with his cozy, almost ASMR-like build videos and sound tests. Some of the first videos of this hobby I saw were from the Wildcat channel, and I definitely learned a lot from watching his videos in regards to switch and stabilizer tuning. We're now in this position where designers are continuing to push boundaries within the keyboard space, especially in a time that PCB design as well as the software we use has really evolved so much. Possibilities for what can be achieved are so much greater than they once were, but I'm glad that the origins of this hobby are still shining through into the modern era, through design choices, mounting styles, and even down to cherry switch purity in builds, giving those who are new a chance to really understand how we got to where we are in this money pit, almost 20 years down the line. Now that's all from me. I hope that you've enjoyed the video and learned a little something about the origins of the hobby. If you did, make sure to subscribe down below and drop a like on the video, and if there are any facts from the early days of the hobby that you like that I didn't mention, make sure to drop them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, socials are all linked, and I will see you nerds in the next one. Peace.